Hello everyone, welcome to my very first full-length tutorial. I'm gonna walk you guys through how I make my miniature fairy books. These are so fun to make. You can experiment with different shapes and sizes, you can put anything you want on the covers, you can paint them, you can add bookmarks to them. They're so customizable, they can be decorative, or you could even use them as an actual mini sketchbook. So I'll walk you through the materials first, and then I will show you how to put them together. The first thing that we need is some thin cardboard. You can use cereal boxes or other recycled materials like that. I like to use these sheets that come in the back of scrapbook paper packs. For my paper, I prefer to use watercolor paper because it's nice and thick, it has good texture. Since we need to cut through several different materials, I like to have different cutting tools like a blade, a paper trimmer, and a couple different sizes of scissors. You'll also need some pencils and a ruler to mark your measurements, some brushes to add your cover details, and I like to use this leather cord for bookmarks. But you can also save the scraps that you trim off of the edges of your book. Since we're sewing the pages together, we'll need a needle and thread. I'm going to be using matte Mod Podge and E6000 as adhesives, and I like to have some clothespins around to hold pages together while everything's drying. These are the leather scraps that I use for the covers of my books. I'm not sure if it's real or fake leather. I don't like using animal products in my work, but these were given to me by someone who's going to throw them away, so I definitely prefer to save materials from being tossed. And the last thing that you'll need are some paints for decorating your covers. These inks are my favorite to use for embellishing my covers. They're metallic gold and silver, and you can also find these in a bunch of different colors. I just think they stand out really nicely on the leather. Alright, the first thing that I'm doing is just breaking this large sheet of cardboard down into smaller, more workable pieces so that it's easier to cut the sizes that I need for my mini books. And you really only have to do this if you're making like a batch of them, like I am. This just makes it easier to do that. For this video, I'm making my books 2 by 1 1/4 inches. So I'm just going down and marking every 1.25 inches so that I can cut strips across, and then I'll cut those into 2-inch segments. If you don't have a paper trimmer, you can just mark the same measurements on the other side and draw a line and just cut it with scissors. I just really prefer to use the paper trimmer, especially like I said when I'm making batches of them. It just makes it a lot easier to cut several straight lines. Now that I have all of these base shapes, I can work on cutting the spine. So I'm just going in and marking the center of each of these pieces, which on a 2-inch piece is just 1 inch from one of the sides. And then I'm going to be taking a kind of a dull blade so that it doesn't cut all the way through. You just want to kind of make an incision halfway through the cardboard so it can be bent. I just wanted to show you guys examples of the other shapes that you can make your books. The possibilities really are endless with this project. For our paper to fit the size book that we're doing for this project, we want it to be about 1.75 by 1 inch. So I'm just going down this sheet of paper and marking it every 1.75 inches, and then I'm going to cut it into strips like I did for the cardboard. Now that we have our 1.75 inch wide strips of paper, I'm going to go down and mark them every 1 inch. To make it easier to cut a lot of pages, I'll just take 2 or 3 of these strips and lay them on top of each other and then cut them at the same time. You do need to be careful when you do this step so that the paper doesn't shift in your hand, because your pages can come out uneven if you're cutting, several pieces of paper that are not aligned with each other. Now that all of our pages are neatly cut, I'm just going to fold them all in half and nest them into each other in groups of 4. While my pages are being held together, I'm going to use a pencil to mark the spots where I'm going to pass a needle through to sew the pages together. I tend to use a duller needle when I'm actually sewing the pages together because I poke myself quite a bit. So I'm just using this sharp needle tool to make the holes in the paper ahead of time so that I can just pass my dull needle with my thread through the holes. The thread on the inside of your page groups is going to show when you assemble your book. So to make it look as nice as possible, this is the order that I like to sew things in. I'll pass through the back bottom hole, the front middle hole, the top back hole, and then back through the front middle. Once you've done this and pulled it nice and tight, I like to pass through the knot on the top since we're going to be connecting the 2 page groups together. I'm just going to be repeating the same order as the first page group, except on this one, when I pass back through to the back, I'm going to be looping it around the thread on the back of the other group just to keep everything nice and tidy. After you make sure everything is nice and tight, to finish it off, just pass it through all of the thread and make a knot or 2. To seal this up, I'm just going to spread a thin layer of E6000 across the edge. I like to get it all in the thread and a little bit seeping through the crack so that everything will hold together nicely and I can trim off the knot without worrying about it coming apart. While the glue is drying, we can get to work on our cover. So I'm just going to take the cardboard piece and I'm going to mark on the leather scrap where I want to cut it. And I'm going to leave a little bit of an excess around the perimeter of the shape. Don't worry about making this cut perfect because we're going to be trimming the excess off when we glue them together. Now that we have our shape cut out, we're going to apply a thin layer of glue to the cardboard piece on the back side. Be careful not to get the glue in the cracks where the spine is so that it can still open and close properly. And then we're going to stick this piece to the back side of the leather scrap. Once your glue is dry, you can start trimming the excess leather off of the book. Something that I learned while making these was that the leather shifts a little bit even after the glue is dry. So you want to close and open the book a couple times to give the leather some room to shift, because if you trim it before you do that, it might end up being a little too short for the edges of your book. Now that the glue on our pages is dry, we can trim the little knots and excess thread off so that it sits flat against the inside of the book. Something that I like to do is make the cardboard inside match the color of the cover, and you can totally skip this step if you don't mind it or if you want it to be different. But what I like to do to make it match is to use watercolor paints as a stain. Once that's dry, we can start assembling our book. So I like to use matte Mod Podge. I'll paint a really thin layer over the front and back pages on these page groups, and then stick that directly onto the cardboard. Now that everything's assembled, we can finally decorate the covers of our books. This is my favorite part. The possibilities are just endless with what you can create. There are so many good places to find inspiration for what to put on your cover. You could just start doodling, you could look around your house at books that you have, you could go on Pinterest, or you could look up antique books or embellished books. There are just endless possibilities for what you can put on the covers. I've cleaned up the details and added a little bit more, and this is how this book came out. I love this one. I ended up giving this one to one of my best friends for her birthday so she could write her tiny herbology notes in there. To seal everything up, I recommend using a gloss varnish. Something that you can paint on is better than something that you spray on, because if you're going to be opening and closing the book a lot, it could get cracks in it depending on what varnish you use. If you use a gloss Mod Podge, that has worked for me, but if you handle it a lot, it can rub off since it is water soluble. If you'd like to add bookmark details, you can either use the leather cords that I showed you at the beginning of the video, or you can save your leather scraps from where you trimmed them when you fit them to your book. They look really nice in books that lay open flat, and they also look really nice hanging out of the side of the book and wrapped around the book like a tie. Here is a look at all of the different covers that I made while I was filming this video. Please feel free to use any of these for inspiration. I had so much fun making these. My sketchbook is full of doodles of different cover ideas.